After you click on the today's lesson button, that'll take you to this page here with low key on it. Right there. Hi, Malin. I was just giving directions for the bell work. We still have about 4 or 5 minutes to work on it. So from our class homepage, you're going to click here for today's lesson. You're going to scroll down until you're just underneath the picture of Loki. And here, this link where it says Peaches and Plums, page 7, that's your bell work for today. Go ahead and get started on that. We're going to work on that until about 9:13. And then we're going to move on to our next activity. If you don't get done with it before we move on, just leave it open in a tab and come back and finish it up. It is due today, but it shouldn't take you that long to finish up. All right, guys, it is time for us to move on. I want to talk to you today about independent variables versus dependent variables. So I'm going to bring up some examples, and we want to talk about what it means for something to be independent, what it means for something to be dependent. And I'm going to have some Zoom polls up just so we can get some good participation going here. Let me fix this real quick. There we go. Okay. So for each of these situations, we want to identify the independent variable and the dependent variable. So one of the ways that this sometimes gets thought of is kind of like cause and effect. Which one would have to come first? Which one would you use to determine the other? So that's kind of how I want to think about this. Which one would you use to determine the other? The one that you would use would be your independent variable, and the one that you would be determining based on that information would be your dependent variable. Okay, so on all of these, the first thing that I want to start off by doing is figuring out what are the two variables. What are the two variables that we are looking at here? So on number one of the variables I see right off the bat. What is one of the things that can change? Absolutely, Tamari, that is correct. Height of the grass. This is one variable. What is the other variable? What is the other variable that they're talking about here? It says over the summer. What do they mean by over the summer? What's changing over the summer? The height of the grass can change. That's why it is a variable. When we say over the summer, what's going on? Weather changes, yes. This one is a little bit deceptive. When we're talking about over the summer, this is talking about time. Over the summer means I'm talking about time. And so this would be our other variable. I'm going to put a Zoom poll up. The first variable in this situation is the height of the grass. And I want to know whether that variable would be the independent variable, the dependent variable, or is this one of those cases where one variable does not clearly depend on the other? So here's how you're going to reach your decision. I'll put the poll up in just a second. If you would use the height of the grass in someone's yard to determine where you are in the summer, what day of summer it is, then it would be the independent variable. If you would use the day of the summer to make a prediction or to determine the height of the grass, then you would say it is the dependent variable. Okay, I'm going to put the poll up. And I want you guys to vote. Wait until we have everybody's votes in. 4 people have voted. Oh, we're up to 5 now, so we've got almost half of us. 3 more votes. I need 2 more people. I can't see who's answering what. All I can see is how many people have answered. Take your best guess. Let's try to finish this up in the next 15 seconds. If you have not yet voted, please vote. 1 more person. Let's get our last person to vote. All right, I'm gonna have to close our poll. We had 5 votes for independent variable. We had 3 votes for dependent variable, and we had 2 votes for this is one of those cases where one variable does not clearly depend on the other. The height of the grass, I'm thinking about, you know, if you've let the lawn go for a little while, not necessarily somebody who's out mowing it every single week, but kind of like a big empty field. The height of the grass would be our dependent variable. The height of the grass would be our dependent variable. The time or the day in the summer would be our independent variable. If you had a big empty field that people didn't go to very often, and you measured the grass on the first day of summer, and then you didn't go back for a long, long time, and you go back, somebody says, hey, I went by that field the other day and the grass is really getting tall out there. You're like, yeah, I figured. Haven't been out there in a while. Time has continued to pass. And you could probably make, if you knew how fast grass grew, you could probably make a reasonable prediction about how tall the grass is. But you know that as time passes, if nobody's going out there and mowing it, the grass is going to be getting taller and taller and taller. That's why it is our dependent variable. All right. Let's look at number 2. I want to start off by just what are our 2 variables? So tell me in the chat, what is one of the variables you see there? Number of buses. Tony, that's okay. I'll give you better directions next time. Number of buses is one of our variables. What is the other variable? Number of students. Yes. So here's our 2 variables. And I want to try to determine which one of these, independent or dependent, is the number of buses. So we have the number of buses needed to take different numbers of students on a field trip. So think about here at Pike. We're going to pretend for a minute that it's a normal year. I don't even know what that looks like anymore. So we've got field trips at different schools happening. And the transportation department has to figure out how to make all of this work. So I want to know whether or not the number of buses you would use to determine how many students go on the field trip? Or would you use how many students are going on the field trip to determine the number of buses? If you use buses to determine students, then buses is independent. If you use students to determine buses, then that would make it your dependent variable. All right, I'm going to launch the poll again. You guys are going to vote. If you're on a computer, it should just pop up on your screen. If you're on your phone, you're going to have to swipe to get to the poll. So would you use buses to determine how many students are going? If you would do that, then it's independent. If you use students to determine buses, then you would say it is your dependent variable. Awesome, awesome, awesome. We are over halfway. Fantastic. Got 4 more people that we need to vote. Again, if you're on your phone, you're going to have to swipe to see the poll. If you're on your computer, the poll should just pop up. If you can't see it, please let me know in the chat. Waiting on 3 more people. Fantastic, guys. Two more people now. Nice work, by the way. I need to shut it down in about 10 seconds, so please make your decision. Independent, dependent, or is this one of those cases where you can't tell? All right, I'm going to go ahead and end it. And I am going to share these results with you. I am very pleased. Can you guys see the results? Awesome. Everybody chose dependent variable. Everybody that voted is correct. Number of buses would be our dependent variable. And number of students would be our independent variable. All right, I'm going to put up another couple examples. We're just going to keep practicing with this independent dependent. So first we're going to do, just like before, is figure out what are the 2 variables, and then we're going to vote on which one that first variable is. All right, I've got 2 more examples up here. Let me get my little sheet up here. Which one would you use to determine the other? The weight of your dog and the reading on the scale. What are the 2 variables? What are the 2 variables? Weight is a variable. And the scale, yep, reading on the scale, or the number on the scale. All right, so the first variable in this sentence is the weight of the dog. Would you use the weight of the dog to determine what the scale is going to say? If that's the case, you're going to say it's the independent variable. Or would you use what the scale is going to say to determine the weight of your dog? I'm going to relaunch this poll. All right, take a vote. Is the weight the independent or the dependent? Does the dog's weight determine what the scale says? Or does the scale determine how much the dog weighs? Close to halfway. Yes, absolutely. So does how much the dog weighs determine what the scale is going to say? If that's the case, then it's the independent variable. Or does what the scale says determine how big your dog is? If the scale is the thing that decides how big your dog is, then the weight of the dog would be the dependent variable. If the weight of the dog is used to determine what the scale says, then the weight would be the independent variable. All right. We are kind of, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll and share the results with you guys. We are half and half. We are split on our decision. And I think part of it is the way we're thinking about it. Does the scale make the dog get bigger or smaller? No. We can use what the scale says to say whether the dog is this many pounds or that many pounds, but the scale is not the thing that is determining how big your dog is. What determines how fat or skinny your dog is? What determines, like what would make the weight of your dog change? What would make the weight of your dog change? Food, that would be one thing. Is there anything else that would make the weight of your dog change? Water, exercise. Yeah, maybe even just what breed it is, right? Like if you have a husky and I have a toy poodle, husky's going to be bigger. Toy poodles are pretty small. So there's a lot of different things that can determine how much your dog weighs. But when I'm taking my dog to the vet, the scale isn't the thing that tells my dog, you have to weigh this much. When I put my dog on the scale, the dog tells the scale, you are going to read back the number that tells me the correct weight. So the weight of the dog here is the independent variable. And the reading on the scale is the dependent. If it worked the other way around, I could program the scale in my bathroom to always tell me the number that I want, and I'd step on it every morning and be like, oh, look, I'm the perfect weight. It doesn't matter what I eat. Because the scale determines how much I weigh. No, how much I eat or how much I exercise or, you know, the different ways I take care of myself determines what that scale is going to tell me when I step on it. I know some of these can be a little bit tricky. That's why we're doing several of them. All right, next one. The amount of time you spend in an airplane and the distance between your departure, where you started, and your destination, where you're going. What are the two variables here? Time in the airplane, yep. So time is one of our variables. And distance, yes. Distance would be our other variable. All right, so we have time and we have distance. Those are our two variables. I'm going to relaunch the poll. I want to know the first variable up there, time. Would you use the time in the airplane to determine the distance between two things? If that's the case, it'll be your independent variable. Or would you use the distance between two places to determine how much time you're going to spend in the airplane? All right, poll is up again. Do you think it's the independent? Do you think it's the dependent? Or do you think this is one of those situations where you cannot clearly tell? See, we've got 8 people that have voted. I'm going to leave it open for about another 40 seconds. So please get your vote in. Waiting on one more person. 20 more seconds and then I'm going to close it. We're going to look at those results then. All right. So here's our results. The book agrees with the majority of the class. I personally feel like this is one of those where I feel like I need to know a little bit more about the situation before I can decide. Are you already on the airplane? Or are you like in the airport getting ready to get on the airplane? If that's the case, then yes, I think time is your dependent variable and the distance is your independent variable. Are you planning the trip? If that's where we are, if you're still planning the trip and you're like, I don't want to be in the plane that long, then you might decide how long do you want to spend in the airplane first and use that to determine where you would go. So I think you could kind of go either way on this one. I feel like I need some more information, but the majority of the class said that time was dependent. That is also what the book says. Oops. And so I would put that as our dependent then. How far apart those two places are is what would determine the length of the flight. All right. Let's look at a couple more. You guys are doing good. I feel like we're getting the hang of this. Some of these you gotta like really think about for a little bit. Let's get another one up here. Okay. Put my little cheat down at the bottom. On number 5, what are the two variables that we have? What are the two variables that we have? Diameter. Diameter is one of the variables. Number of times you dip. Yes. That is our other variable. What does diameter mean? What does diameter mean? Outside, yeah, diameter is going to be like, if I'm looking down at the top of this candle, so if this is the candle, and if this is the top of the candle, the diameter is the widest part. That would be the diameter. So kind of how big around is this candle getting, measuring it from like edge to edge, measuring the widest part. Okay. First variable is the number of times that you dip this candle into the hot wax. I don't know if you guys have ever made candles or ever watched anybody make candles. I took my daughter to a thing back in October. She got to participate. They had like these little cans of hot wax and cold water in a circle, and she was outside, and they gave her a stick with a little piece of wick on it, and she would walk around the circle. My daughter's 5, so she thought this was great. She would dip the wick in the hot wax, and then she'd take a couple steps and dip it in the cold water so that the wax would get hard. And then she'd walk around and she'd dip it in hot wax again, and then cold water, and she'd go around and around and around and around until eventually the candle was big enough. So would the number of times that she dipped this candle into the hot wax determine how fat that candle was? Or does how fat that candle is determine how many times she has to dip it into the wax? Which one would you use to determine the other, or which one causes the other? That might be another way to think of it. I'm going to relaunch the poll, and I want you guys to vote on the number of times you dipped. Do you think that's independent, dependent, or you can't tell? Independent, dependent, or you can't tell? Which one would you use to determine the other? Or you can think of it as cause and effect. Which one causes the other? Waiting on a couple more people here. All right. Majority says independent variable, and I agree. Number of times you dip. As my daughter was doing this around this circle, how many times she dipped the candle? Every time she dipped the candle, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so how many times she had dipped it determined the diameter of that candle. All right, last one. We'll stop here for today. Amount of money you owe to the library and the number of days your book is overdue. What are the two variables here? What are our two variables? Money is one of them. So here's a variable. And number of days. There's our other variable. All right, I'm going to relaunch our poll. Is the amount of money determined by how many days overdue your book is? Or does the number of, Is the amount of money determined by the number of days, or is the number of days determined by the money? Which one kind of causes the other? Waiting on a couple more people. Had 9 votes so far. Nice. Overwhelming majority said that money is the dependent variable, and I agree. The money owed gets determined by how overdue your book is. All right. For those of you that joined us late, there was a bell work today that we did. You need to complete that before the end of the day. Peaches and plums, very short. You guys do also have a homework assignment tonight. Electric bill, unit 4, homework 1. This is your first real homework. It's due tomorrow morning. It is not long. Honestly, it's about as long as the bell work was. Neither one of these is horribly long. You guys need to finish both of those up. Have the peaches and plums done by the end of the day today, and have the electric bill done by the end of the day tomorrow. I think technically it says it's tomorrow morning, but if you don't get it into me until tomorrow night, that's totally fine. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you tomorrow. Send me messages and cues if you have any questions, any difficulties with anything. Bye, guys.